in this video, you are going to learn how to factor a trinomial where a is greater than 1 using the AC method. AC method is just the grouping method, and you're going to see why in a few minutes. So the first thing we need to remember is, what is a trinomial? Our trinomials always look like this: ax squared plus bx plus c. Make sure it is in standard form. If it's not in standard form, you need to put it in standard form. Our first example here, 3x squared minus 8x plus 4, is in standard form. My x squared is first, my x is second, and my constant is last. Now, our next step, just like when you factor any type of polynomial, you want to factor out a greatest common factor. Here, there is no greatest common factor. So, first thing I'm going to do is multiply a and c, but I need to determine what my a and c are. So up top here, I'm going to write my a is 3, my b is negative 8, and my c is 4. And you should always do this too. It is super helpful when you are going through steps, because if anything, you're probably going to mess up which letter is which. Alright, so step 1, or step 3 here, says multiply a by and c. So a times c is 3 times 4, which gets me 12. Step 1 is done. Next thing we have to do is find factors of AC, which we got is 12, that would add up to B. And we know our B is negative 8. So, I have to think of factors of 12, so two numbers that multiply together to be 12, but add to be a negative 8. Since this number here is positive, and this number here is negative, I know the two factors are both going to have to be negative, because a negative times a negative will get me a positive, but a negative plus a negative will get me this negative over here. So you gotta make sure you're paying attention to your factors. So I know that 2 and 6 get me 12, and I also know 2 plus 6 get me a positive 8. So just like I was talking about, both of those factors have to be negative. Now, to be able to use the grouping method, we need 4 terms. We have 3 terms here. So what's going to happen is this negative 2 gets an x, and this negative 6 gets an x. Because negative 2x plus negative 6x gets me negative 8x. So I am going to transform this polynomial here to have 4 terms. So instead of negative 8x, I'm writing negative 2x minus 6x. And then everything else stays the same. So it's going to say 3x squared at the beginning and plus 4 at the end. If you put negative 6x here and negative 2x there, do not fret. You'll get the same answer as me in the end. So what we are going to do from here is our grouping method. We're going to group our first 2 terms together, and we're going to group our last 2 terms together. Our greatest common factor here, 3x squared minus 2x, is just an x. So I'm going to pull an x out of both. My greatest common factor over here, since that is negative, the number I'm pulling out has to also be negative, and I'm pulling out a 2, a negative 2. No x, because there's no x connected to that 4. So x is coming to the front. 3x squared divided by x leaves a 3x, because 2 minus 1 just leaves me 1. Negative 2x divided by x leaves me a minus 2, because those x simplify away. Now this minus 2, remember, goes right here. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 gives me a positive 3x. 4 divided by negative 2 gives me a negative 2. I double check to make sure my insides are the same. They are. Write it once, and x minus 2 gets written in a set of parentheses. It does not matter which one goes first, so if you wrote your answer like this, that is perfectly fine because that just means that you switch these two at the beginning. But remember, 4 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 4, so you are allowed to write your answer either way. Alright, let's try another one together. So our first step is to make sure it's in standard form, which it is. Our next step is to look for a GCF. If there's any greatest common factor, which there is not. Third step is to multiply A times C. So A is 4, B is 5, and C is negative 9. So A times C, 4 times negative 9, is negative 36. Now, I need to think of two numbers that multiply together to be negative 36, but add to be B. So they have to multiply to be AC, but add to be B. I know negative 9 times 4, which we just noticed got me negative 36. And negative 9 plus 4 gets me a negative 5. But I need positive 5. So I'm just going to switch the signs and see if that works better. 9 plus a negative 4 gets me a positive 5. So these will be the numbers I use. Now, instead of 5x, I am writing 9x, because I want to make sure there's x's connected to both of them, because then it won't be an equivalent polynomial, minus 4x, and this is positive, so I'm putting that plus sign there. And the other two terms in this polynomial get rewritten. Now, group, I can take an x out of both of these, and because this sign here is negative, I'm taking out a negative. There's nothing in common of a 4x and a 9, so I'm just going to take out a negative 1 out of both. X comes to the front. 4x squared divided by x just leaves me 4x. 9x divided by x leaves me a positive 9. Negative 4x divided by negative 1, and I'm going to make sure I put that negative 1 there. It's going to give me a positive 4x. Negative 9 divided by negative 1 gives me a positive 9. Insides are the same. Write it once. X and minus 1 get put in the same set of parentheses. And that is your final answer. Let one of your teachers know if you have any questions.